Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I gave a lot of AKS trainings, but last week I gave a training for on-premise Kubernetes cluster, and I thought this might be something interesting for you, how to set it up and how to make sure it's highly available. And since I had to research it, I thought I'm just going to share it with you. So the plan for today is I'm going to give you a 1-minute introduction into K3s, a lightweight Kubernetes distribution, and how we can use the tool ketchup, the K3sup, pronounced ketchup, how we can leverage it to set up the cluster and also make it highly available. This means we have multiple master nodes and multiple worker nodes. After the introduction, we're going to take a look at the demo. There I'm going to show you how to create 4 Azure VMs. So one is going to be my management VM, and the 3 others I'm going to use for the cluster. And then I'm going to show you how we can deploy K3s and configure 3 master nodes. If you're not using Azure, that's no problem at all. You can use any VMs you want. You can use on-premise, it doesn't matter. Since I'm an Azure guy, I just use Azure VMs today. So now let's take a look at K3s. I like K3s for on-premise solutions because it's a very lightweight Kubernetes distribution. It is open source. It has a great documentation. You can install it with a 1-line curl command. It sets up a master and worker node on the same machine, and it takes you 1 minute to get started. But also that's a bit of a problem if you don't just want to test. For testing, it's fine having master and worker node on the same VM, but for the production, you want to have at least multiple VMs and multiple master nodes. Then we have ketchup. It's a lightweight utility for K3s. So this means it's just an kind of an extension. So it builds up on K3s and it provides additional features and also simplifies the deployment, especially as we are going to see in the demo, the joining of the multiple VMs into one cluster. What's great about ketchup is it's open source. It has a big community, so you can ask questions. You have the documentation there, and there's also a free and a paid version. Today I'm going to show you the free version, but if you need additional tools or features, then the pro version might be the right fit for you. So that's everything I want to say for the introduction. Let's switch over to terminal and let's get started with the demo. All right, here in the terminal, let's define a couple variables first. So these are more like general variables for Azure. So that's the location where I'm going to deploy my VMs, the name of the resource group, and I'm also joining all of them in the same VNet. So I have here the name. Next up, I have a whole bunch of variables for my VMs. So I have the 4 names. I just named them K3s1 to 3 for the cluster, and K3s management for the VM I use for the management of the cluster. Then I configure the IPs, so I know how they can join through the private network. I'm using Ubuntu 24.04, then a normal VM size. My admin user is Wolfgang, and I also have here my password. I could also use SSH keys, obviously, but I just try to keep it as simple as possible for you. And I also try to script it, but again, keep it simple. I said it before, but if you have any other VMs, you don't have to create the Azure VMs, and I will have a timestamp down below, so you can just skip forward to the installation of K3s. But for now, let's create a new resource group, and then we are going to deploy everything inside this resource group. So once this is done, so only takes a couple seconds, now we're creating our VNet. Here I don't provide an IP range, and in this case Azure will give me a default one, which is 10.0.0.0/8, I think. So I don't have to think about this. It's actually /24 for the subnet, but it works as well for the demo. So since I want to give my VMs a private fixed IP address, I have to create a network card first, or a NIC. And I can do this by just providing a name. In this case, I name it like the VM and add the NIC at the end. I add it to the VNet I just created and also to the subnet. And I give it the IP address I configured before. So that's 10.0.0.100 in this case. Then I repeat this for the VMs 2 and 3. So I just paste basically the same code, except that the variable is different for the name, like you can see here. But everything else is the same, except obviously the IP address is different. And now I can already create my VMs. So first I'm going to create this management VM. I use this VM so I don't have to install anything on my machine. I can just SSH into this VM and then create the cluster. But you can also use your on-premise, Ubuntu, SSL, whatever you want. This is just for me easier and cleaner. And here I provide basically everything I've configured before. And I also tell it I want a public IP address, so I can SSH into it, and I query this IP address into this variable. So this should take 1 to 2 minutes, so I'm going to stop the video here. Actually, it's already finished. So if we check, we should have our IP address, so that's great. And now we can create our cluster VMs. So as we can see here, it's very similar, except I add here the NIC because I want a private IP address. I don't need a public IP address because I can access it over the VNet of the management VM. And I also don't query any IP because I already know the IP it will have. I also added this no wait parameter. This means I don't have to wait until the VM is created, so I just can continue quicker. Then I repeat the same for the VM2. So as you can see here on the name and also on the NIC. And then we're going to repeat it one last time for the third one. So now while we continue, the VMs are being created, but again, it should take 1 to 2 minutes, so we don't have to wait for them to be finished. In the meantime, we can SSH into our management VM. So I just use my username and the public IP I queried from before. Then I have to check for my password, what I configured, and paste it in here. And then I'm connected to the VM. So now I want to install first kubectl, so I can access my Kubernetes cluster or K3s cluster. To do this, I create a new folder named .kube, and then I install kubectl. So this is going to take around 1 minute. And after this is installed, we are going to install ketchup. With ketchup, we can then create the K3s cluster. This means we don't have to install K3s manually, and we can also configure all the VMs to join the cluster. All right, so kubectl has been installed. Now we can install ketchup first with a curl. We download the install script. That's very small, so it's very fast. And then we can just install it with sudo install ketchup. This also takes only a second. And to check that everything has been installed, we can do a ketchup version. Here you can see the version we have and that it has been installed. So now one thing with ketchup is that it connects with SSH keys to the VMs and then installs K3s. But to be able to do this, you have to configure that the user connecting to the VM has automatically root permissions without using sudo. If you use a cloud VM like I do, you usually have this already, but to be sure, we can open vsudo, then we scroll all the way down, and here we can add our user. So that's the user I'm using to connect to my VMs. That's the VM admin user I configured. So here that's the user Wolfgang. And then with these parameters, I give this user the root permissions without using sudo. Then we are going to save this. And now we can configure or create an SSH key so we can connect to the VMs over SSH. So first we're going to check our SSH folder just to make sure there's nothing. Since I just created the VM, I only have this authorized keys. Then I can use SSH key again. I provide any name, for example, K3s management key. Then it asks me where I want to save this file, so I just leave the default. I also don't add a passphrase, and my keys have been created. To check this, we can do again a dir in my home folder in the SSH folder, and now I can see we have these 2 keys here. So to be able to connect to the VMs now, we have to copy the keys on the 3 VMs. So let me quickly define the variables we have configured on my Windows machine before. So that's the admin user and the 3 private IP addresses of my VMs. And now I can do SSH copy with the username and the IP address. Then I have to provide my password. So right now I'm logging in with username and password. But once I've done this, I copy the SSH key on the VM, and the next time I try to connect, I can just use the SSH key and I don't need a password. Then we're going to repeat this for the second VM. So again, the same user, and this time the IP address of the second VM. I again paste my password, and the SSH key will be copied on this VM. Then we repeat it one last time for the third VM. And now we have the SSH key on all our 3 VMs we are going to use for the K3s cluster. Now we have everything set up so we can create the cluster, or to be more precise, the first node of the cluster. And we're going to use ketchup for this. So using ketchup install. Then the first IP address is the one we want to have our initial master node. Then we provide the user. We say we want to create a cluster. Then I have to provide my SSH key so I can authenticate to the VM. I provide the K3s version. So as of recording, that's the latest version. And with this merge parameter, I just tell it to merge the kubeconfig in my existing file and set the context to my K3s. If you don't set this, I think by default your kubeconfig will be overwritten. So now ketchup connects to the VM over SSH, and with the SSH keys it doesn't need a password. We also provided the username, which has root access on the VM. Therefore, I don't have to enter again a sudo or a password, so everything is done fully automatically. And that's it. Now we just installed K3s on 1 VM, and we have a master and a worker node. To check this, we can do a simple kubectl get node. Here you can see we have the K3s1, that's the name of the VM. We have the control plane. We also have etcd, and it's the master, and the age is 20 seconds ago. So you can see we have just created this cluster. So now that we already have a cluster, to add more VMs, we are going to use ketchup join instead of ketchup install. So this is different. Then we have a couple different parameters. So the first one, the IP, is the IP of the server you want to join. But we also have here a server IP, and that's the initial master. So that's the server or the master node of the K3s cluster we have created before. Then you have to provide the user of this master node and the user of the VM. In my case, it's the same users. And with this server parameter, I tell ketchup to create another master node. This means this new VM will also be a master node and a worker node. Then I provide the path to my SSH key and again the same K3s version. So now almost the same thing is happening as before. So ketchup is installing K3s, but it's also getting the access token from the master node and uses this access token to join the new VM to the existing cluster. This will only take a couple seconds, and after it is done, we can do again a kubectl get node, and then we'll see we have two nodes in our cluster, and both of them are going to be master nodes. Here you can see it takes a little bit longer because ketchup has to install K3s, but it also has to link the new VM to the existing one, therefore creating the cluster. So this is finished. Let's do a kubectl get node. And here you can see we have now twice the control plane, we have etcd installed, and we also have a master. And here you can see we have the new one with the name K3s2. So that's basically everything you have to do. So now, right now we have a cluster with two VMs. Both VMs are running the master node, the worker node. So it's already kind of highly available, but to be considered fully highly available, you usually need 3. So we're going to repeat this process one last time. It's the same command as before, except that, so again, we have the server IP of the IP1. So that's our initial master node, but for the IP of the server, we're using the IP3. Everything else stays the same. So right now, ketchup is again downloading K3s, it's starting all the services, and once they're running, it will get the access token from the master node and then join this new node to the existing cluster. And there we have it. So I didn't even have to stop the video to wait for it, so it should be already there. One last check, we can do a kubectl get nodes, but this time I will sort it by the internal IP. Then make this a bit smaller. I hope you can still read it. But here you can see we have the 3 IPs we configured before. Then we have here 1 master, 2 master, 3 master. We can see they're all running the same Kubernetes version or K3s version. And we can also see here the names of our 3 nodes. So this means we have now a K3s cluster with 3 master nodes and also 3 worker nodes. If you want to split up your master and your worker nodes, then you could set a taint. For example, the no execute taint on one of the master nodes, and then no workload would be deployed on this master node. But this also means you should have even more than 3 VMs. For now, for the sake of the demo, I think this explains everything and makes it clear how it works. That's already everything I wanted to show you today. So once we have our VMs running, we can install ketchup on one of our VMs. Then we have to create the SSH keys and distribute them on all the VMs we want to join in the cluster. And then with ketchup, it's just one command to create the first node. This means we have a master node and worker node. And then we can join the additional VMs to our cluster. Today I showed you with the server parameter that we can create a master node on the additional ones. We don't have to do this, but it makes the cluster just more highly available. If you want to split up even further, you can set a taint, the taint no execute, and then Kubernetes doesn't schedule any of your pods on a node with this taint. So you can completely split the master from the worker node. This just means you should have more VMs than the 3 I showed you today, but this would even better separate the operations. And if one VM fails, you have many other VMs to continue running. If you have any questions or if you want to see how to do this, let me know in the comments. I would also appreciate if you could like and share the video. It helps out the channel. And if you're interested in this kind of topics, Kubernetes, cloud, DevOps, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week with another video.